Well, good morning, everybody from Brisbane on the east coast of Australia, and good evening from Canada on the west coast of Canada. My name's Alison Rice. I'm the Acting Director for Business Development for Health and Biosecurity at CSIRO. CSIRO is Australia's Commonwealth National Science Agency. And together with my co-host Ben Scott, who's at the at GIFS in Saskatchewan, we're co-hosting the Global Biofoundry Alliance working group on sustainable business model development for biofoundries. This is the third of our global webinars, and the aims of these webinars are to help people think about sustainable business model development for biofoundries so that they're not reliant on subsidies, ways of placement of biofoundry models, outreach strategies, and basically learning from each other. And today we've got some marketing and communications experts, and I'm going to hand over to Ben now to introduce our speakers.
Great, thanks, Alison. So our first speaker is going to be Olufunke Okochi, who's actually my colleague at the Global Institute for Food Security. She joined GIFS in 2019, and she has a diverse and exciting career in the public and private sectors. Her experience includes corporate communications, public relations, strategic and relationship management, and operations management. Prior to joining GIFS, Funke was at the government of Saskatchewan, where she provided strategic communications counsel to a number of key economic functions, working to promote opportunities in Saskatchewan and build and improve quality of life for residents. She also worked at the Petroleum Technology Research Center, where she provided leadership to the organization's communications and corporate affairs areas. Funke holds a Bachelor of Science honors in mass communication from the University of Lagos. She also obtained a Master of Arts in Justice Studies with a research focus in international relations and a certificate in public relations, both from the University of Regina. Funke has served and continues to serve on a number of community boards and committees, including the boards of the Regina Open Door Society and SAS Culture, and the RCMP F Division Commanding Officers Cultural Diversity Advisory Committee. Thank you so much, Funke, for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, Ben, and hi everyone. It's great to be here, and it's great to meet Alison as well, and to be speaking with Jennifer about communications and marketing strategies for scientists. I thought that I'll give just a little bit of a background on the Global Institute for Food Security, where Ben mentioned we both work at the Institute, and I'm just going to be sharing my slides now. Hopefully everyone can see. Can you see my slides? Oh, not yet, sorry.
Not yet.
Can you see it now? Yes, perfect. Thank you. So I'm just going to share from the beginning. And so I thought I'll start off with just a little bit of an introduction on the Global Institute for Food Security. You may have had this, have heard some of this before through Ben, but just a little bit about who we are. We are an industry government academic partnership that's focused on advancing research and development all the way through to commercialization, to provide, sustainable, innovative solutions for food security. We've got a vision of a world where everyone has access to safe and nutritious food, but we also do this, it's a bold vision. It's a lot to take on, and we're very mindful that it's something we cannot do on our own. And that's why our mission is to work with partners to discover, develop, and deliver innovative solutions for the production of globally sustainable food. And, there's so many key elements to that, but essentially GIFS, or the Global Institute for Food Security, plays along the entire innovation pipeline, from research all the way through to delivery of innovative solutions. We're looking to take research along the line and through what's called the Valley of Death, all the way to delivering a market impact. So that's who we are at GIFS. Our purpose is to be an agriculture and food connector and an innovation catalyst. We look to advance innovation to bridge the gap to commercialization, as I said, and also connect various services together. And with this, we are so focused on collaboration and how important it is for various partners in the food and agriculture sector to work together to advance innovation. So that's in a nutshell who we are. We do this through some of our technology platforms and some of our programs, one of which is a technology platform on engineering biology. Ben actually leads this platform. I see another lead for this platform. Our business lead, Mega, is on the call as well. Our engineering biology platform, which we are currently building at the Global Institute for Food Security, is going to be focused on protein engineering, biomanufacturing, and natural products as well. It's just one of the 5 technology platforms that we have at GIFS. And I say this to kind of, make the point that, as an institute, we are focused on research and development, and we've got a number of technology-specific platforms that we run at the Institute, and the need to constantly communicate with a diverse group of clients and customers internally and externally. At GIFS, we're so mindful that agriculture as a sector is a really large umbrella that's got people from diverse walks of life and diverse disciplines working together. And the same is true for the Global Institute for Food Security, because we've got business leads, we've got molecular biologists, we've got physicists, we've got computer scientists, we've got various disciplines all working together to advance innovation in agriculture and food. And we find that we're constantly challenged with the need to ensure that we communicate in a way that various audiences understand what we're saying and walk away with the meat of what is most important and what we want to share with them. Very much so on the internal space, because when we come together as a team, everyone does not necessarily understand the details of what everyone else is doing, just because we've got a number of different disciplines working together. But also, more importantly, when we're speaking outside, we want to ensure that our various audiences understand what we're doing, understand the science of what we're doing and why we're doing this. So because of this, at the Global Institute for Food Security, we've got a communications team that has helped to develop a number of strategies to ensure that we're communicating on message to the right audience. And it helps to guide us so that we're intentional about what we say, how we say it, and the different channels that we use to pass our messages across. So we've got a corporate communications strategy. We've also got communication plans for our various technology platforms and for our programs as well that help to drive how we pass our messages across to various audiences. So I thought I'll start up, I thought what I could focus on for the purpose of this conversation is to walk through the elements of a communication strategy. If you go to an organization and you're tasked with writing a communication strategy, there are various elements of that strategy that are pretty standard. You can tweak and adjust as necessary, but as a whole, the entire strategy is built to help ensure that you are communicating your message in the most accessible language and in the most accessible way to the audience that you have clearly defined, and to ensure also that the communication is reaching the goals that you have set out to achieve. So I thought I'll just kind of walk through the elements of communication strategy. And I know that Jennifer is going to be talking about marketing, and I look forward to hearing the questions that you may have as well, based on our conversation today. So essentially, we do a communication strategy to ensure that we are, very intentional about our messaging and ensure that we're hitting off on the right message to the right audience at the right time. And there are various, you might have heard about the 5 W's and the H, which is you always want to be mindful about who you're speaking to, what it is that you're saying, why you're saying it, and why your message is important and why it matters. When, if there's a time component, when is this happening, or when is it going to have an impact? Where is your message relevant and pertinent, and how are you doing what you're doing, or how do you want to share the message that you're communicating? So those are all factors that we consider when we're thinking about communications. But I wanted to just focus a little bit about the what and the why, because I think when you're drafting a communications plan, or you're thinking about how to share your message, whether it's about your biofoundry and you're trying to attract various audiences or attract different clients or customers, or whether you're trying to sell a book, or whether you're just trying to pass a message across about maybe a Christmas party in your organization, you always want to think about what you're doing and why, and I know we talk a lot about that at the Global Institute for Food Security. We talk about what is a why should people care about your message, but also, figuring out the what. in a time of information overload, it's very easy to think that something else is your area of focus, whereas it's something else entirely. So you always want to drill down to figure out what is it exactly that I'm trying to share, and what message exactly is it that I'm trying to communicate with my audience. So that's your what, and why are you doing this, and why should people care? I can't overemphasize this enough. It is so important to make sure that you're passing across your why and why people should care and why it matters, because that helps them to connect to what you're saying, and that helps them to put in context how what you're saying relates to them or impacts them or could possibly impact them. So we always want to talk about what is our why. So when you're, for example, designing a communication strategy, you may not call this your what and why. You might call it your issue and your background, and within those sections of your strategy or within those sections of your plan, you're thinking about what is the issue that I'm trying to share, and why am I sharing this now? Why is it important? And there might be some historical context as well to what you're sharing, but essentially figuring out your what and your why will almost get you halfway through the process of ensuring that your message can connect with your audience. Like I said, it could be wanting to pitch your biofoundry or pitch your research to a group at a conference, or it could be just wanting to sell a product. You always want to figure out what it is you're doing and why it's important and why it should matter to your audience. When you're thinking about what you're communicating, it's also important for you to, think about any challenges that there might be to your message going across to your audience. I know at the Global Institute for Food Security, because we're working in research and development, there's a lot of technical language, a lot of technical information that floats around. So like I said, everyone doesn't necessarily understand exactly what everyone else is doing. So, and of course, if you're speaking to the media, for example, about in the past week, we had a news release about some research breakthrough that our colleagues had. We always need to make sure that when we're talking to our audience, for example, the media, we're clearly communicating what the breakthrough is and why it's important, and why it's important enough to put out a news release on the breakthrough. The media would have questions about what does this mean for agriculture? What does this mean for farmers or for producers or for innovation in ag tech? Those are things that you always want to think about. And there could be some challenges, especially in the technical space when you're communicating, especially when it comes to language. When I say language, I'm not talking about, I'm talking more about, using inaccessible language where that's so science heavy and your audience isn't able to, really connect with what you're saying. So it's always important to make sure that you're speaking in terms that are as simple as possible for your audience to be able to grasp and understand and connect to. And so it's, sometimes you might want to note that, for example, with engineering biology, even though it's been around for a few years, it's still relatively new in Canada. And we find that when we're talking about engineering biology, as an example, we're often having to provide lots of examples of what it is and how it's been applied, and, to talk about why it's important and how it matters. And a lot of times in the past, we've given a lot of examples about the COVID vaccine and how engineering biology played a huge role in making, in helping to arrive at a vaccine in such a short period of time. So we give a lot of examples just to make sure that we're passing across the message of what engineering biology is and why it's important in the most simplistic terms as possible. And, when we first started talking about it, we found that media would ask a lot of questions. Okay, so what does this mean? And why does it matter? And what does this mean for Canada? What does this mean for agriculture and food? So we had to really take a step back and provide a lot of examples. But to be honest, it's such a vast field with the potential to do so much that we're always learning about it and always learning what we can to ensure that we're able to pass on the message about, engineering biology or whatever it is that we're talking about in a way that relates with our audience so that they can understand it. But if we're drafting a communications plan about one of our platform technologies, a communication challenge that we might identify is the fact that it is so innovative, the audience may not fully understand what it means or how it works, or really fully understand how it matters to them or why it's important. So we might make a note of that as a challenge. And what that does is once we note that it's a challenge, it enables us to think about strategies to mitigate that challenge or to overcome that challenge. So just making sure that we note possible challenges in any communication strategy ensures that we can think down the line about how best to address those challenges. Challenges are good. They help you think outside the box, and they help you ensure that your message is, as wholesome as it needs to be as well. So possible challenges could be, complex concepts that you need to pass across to your audience, and fact that they may not have the background that you have, so they may not understand it to the same degree that you do as well. It's also important, of course, to understand who your audience is when you're communicating as a scientist, or just generally communicating. You might have you want to understand who you're speaking to, and ensure that you're focused on your audiences as you need to be. You may have a primary audience. For example, if you wanted to pitch your product to a potential customer or a potential funder, that could be your primary audience, but you could also have a secondary audience of people who maybe are not like the core people that you're trying to influence, but they're important enough for you to ensure that you're thinking about them as well. So what I always propose is having messages that are tailored to your primary audience, and then having messages that are tailored to your secondary audience as well. But really focusing on who your primary audience is and understanding what it is you want to achieve and accomplish through them. For example, we have a technology platform that's called the Omics and Precision Agriculture Lab at GIFS, and it's a genomics sequencing lab that also provides phenomics and bioinformatics services. If we were speaking to a potential customer, for example, we will consider them in that case as a primary audience. But if we had a breakthrough in that sequencing facility that we wanted to communicate, to other potential customers, we would probably use the media as a channel to get our message across. So in that case, the media will help us distill our message. The mass media is a way to get your message out to as many people at the same time as possible. Other people will hear about the breakthrough. For example, other members of our university community, or other members or other people who may not necessarily be your customers, but maybe could be impacted by the information that you're sharing, or could be influential in some way, or maybe they're just interested. So they might be a secondary audience that, they're not a primary audience in terms of they're not, the customers we're looking to attract to our business. But if it's the general public, we also want to ensure that if we're pushing our messaging, they can also understand the impact of what we're sharing. So you might have various audiences, and you just break down your audience group into the different categories that you need to. Excuse me. So you've got your primary audience. You might identify XYZ company as a primary audience. You maybe have your secondary audience as well. So you'll ensure that it helps you ensure that you're tailoring your message to reach these different audiences in the best possible way. And also think about what it is you want them to know, and what change are you trying to see, and just keeping this top of mind helps ensure that you're delivering the right message to the right audience. Another important part of a communication strategy is ensuring that you define your goal. You want to make sure that you've got your goal clearly defined. This is what I'm trying to achieve through this communication strategy, or this is what I'm trying to achieve through this communication. And for example, with our engineering biology platform, we quickly realized that there's a need to educate the public about what the platform is and what it can do and how it can transform agriculture and food, because it's going to be the only one in Canada that's focused on agriculture and food. So, before we can even sell to a customer, we need to educate them about what this can do for them. So we identified our goals, the goals of our communications plan as educating, informing, building awareness, and promoting. So you want to think about what your goal is and what the issue is that you're looking to solve, and what influence you're looking to achieve as well. So you keep these top of mind, and they help you in defining your message appropriately. So once you've got your audience, you know what your what is, your why, you've got your goals clearly defined, then you can think about what your message is. What do you want to say to your audience, you always want to be mindful about speaking to your audience and not to you. You know, some things could be very clearly understood by us when we're thinking about that message, but we want to be mindful about the audience too, and mindful about their background and the knowledge that they may have, and make sure that we're not speaking to ourselves, but we're speaking to them. So even if you're going to, for example, a conference, or you're presenting, or you're publishing a paper, you want to ensure that you're speaking to your audience, keeping the message as simple as you possibly can. Be clear, and practice your elevator pitch. So your key message should be a few words strung together that clearly connect what it is that you're trying to say in the most simple terms as you possibly can to the audience that you're speaking to as well. And you might have different groups of audiences. If you're speaking to scientists, you could be a bit more technical, but if you're speaking to the media, of course, you want to make sure that the media will be able to understand what it is that you're saying, and in so doing, help you pass that message across to the broader audience. And as part of a communication strategy, and this isn't always necessary, you probably might want to have an action plan that identifies your goal, what actions you're going to undertake, the timelines, who's responsible, and if there's a cost attached to some of those those actions that you're taking. So in terms of that plan, you use various messages to get your message, various methods to get your message out. You can use presentations, you can use science and non-science publications, you can speak at conferences and events about your message, whatever it is. You can use lunch and learns. It's a simple, casual, informal way to get your message across, depending on who your audience is. For example, at the Global Institute for Food Security, we could use lunch and learns to share what the research that we're working on with other research groups within the institute or within the university community as well. We use marketing materials as well. So we've got brochures, we've got fact sheets and information sheets as well. We use social media. So these are all different tools that are available to you to help push your message out, ensuring that you're keeping your message simple and that you're directing it to the right audience at all times. And of course, the media is also a great resource to put your message out as well. So, the media is such a vast, offers so many vast channels to communicate and share your message with your audience. And because we've got the internet and social media, you can speak to people in different parts of the world through the media, through social media, through internet as well. So you don't always have to think about a TV budget or a radio budget. There's newspapers, there's magazines, there's online prints, there's social media. There's so many channels now that are available to get your message out. And one of it, some of the tools that we use at the Global Institute for Food Security are opinion pieces, news releases, social media, using infographics as well to help ensure that we're passing our message across in as simple terms as we possibly can. One thing that we, when we're speaking with our colleagues who are going to be in front of the media, we do a little bit of coaching as well to help them prepare to speak to the media. And we just encourage our colleagues to speak in as simple terms as possible. They're scientists, they've got a lot of scientific knowledge, which may not necessarily be easily understood by the journalist or the reporter. So we just kind of work with them to identify what their key message is and ensure that they can communicate it as confidently as they possibly can. We always say you're the expert, you know this better than anyone else and better than the media. So you just want to share this information like you're talking to your grandmother or you're talking to your friend. It's always encouraged to speak in and write in grade 8 language and keep it at that level, or maybe a little bit lower depending on who your audience is, but just keep things as simple as possible. Stick to the facts and stick to what you know. If you're asked questions that you don't really understand or you don't really have information for, it's okay to say, I'll get back to you on this, and you can confirm and get back to them on that information. So so all in all, I think I'll just wrap up by saying, you want to keep your message, your comments, whether you're speaking with the media or you're writing or you're speaking to an audience, keep your message as simple as you possibly can. Stick to your key messages. Of course, remain fact-based and speak within your area of expertise as well. And I think I'll just wrap up with that. And, before I wrap up, I just wanted to provide an example, and thank you to Ben for, pointing this out. I wanted to use the Omics and Precision Agriculture Lab as an example. Like I said, it's facility that provides genomics, phenomics, and bioinformatics services for Canada and Saskatchewan and Canada. When we launched this, it's the most advanced of our technology platforms. But when we launched it, we found that there was a need to also educate the audience on what this facility can do and the services that it can provide. And we've used different tools and tactics to get the message out about this facility and what it can do. We've spoken at seminars, we've provided marketing materials, we've sponsored events that have given us speaking opportunities, or we've manned booths where we are able to share material about this platform. We use social media and digital marketing. We use news releases and feature articles. We just use we employ a whole bunch of tactics to help ensure that we're getting our message out to the various audiences that we have. If it's a science publication, it's more targeted towards a science audience. But when we use a news release, it's targeted more towards a general audience that we think will be interested and impacted by the breakthrough or the information it is that we want to share. So these are all things that you consider when you are planning a communication strategy as a scientist. But to be honest, in any field or any area, you want to think about all these important pieces, like what is your why, who's your audience, what's your goal, and what are you looking to accomplish, and what is your key message, and what channels do you want to use to pass this message across. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to share, and I look forward to the conversation following. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Funke. You're welcome to put questions in the chat if you'd like, but we're going to save questions to the end after both speakers have a chance. Up next, we'll just move right into Jennifer's presentation. So Jennifer Andrews is a marketing expert with a science background and an MBA, passionate about simplifying the complex to grow scientific businesses. She's the founder and CEO of FreshLeaf Marketing, and Jennifer brings 14 years of experience in the life sciences industry, including as a marketing director for a natural health research and regulatory firm, and senior marketing director for a medical equipment company. Jennifer's specialties include marketing strategy, brand identity, and messaging, and content creation to help clients stand out, get found, and gain more leads. To date, she has worked with nearly 50 scientific companies and has mentored more than 70 startups and small businesses. She is also the author of Scientist to CEO, the marketing book for businesses built by scientists. She's a sought-after speaker, so very happy that you're here today speaking to us, who has presented to hundreds of entrepreneurs on the topics of marketing strategy and digital marketing. Jennifer is also co-founder of the Life Science Growth Intensive, a group program which delivers coaching and training on marketing and business development for life science companies. She's also a business mentor and industry expert through several accelerators and entrepreneurships across Southern Ontario, including Innovation Guelph. Jennifer is also an active member of various industry organizations, including Life Sciences Ontario and BioEnterprise. In her spare time, she mentors recent graduates and entrepreneurs throughout Southwestern Ontario. Jennifer holds a Bachelor of Science in Biology and a Master of Science in Human Health and Nutrition from the University of Guelph, and a Master of Business Administration from the Lazaridis School of Business and Economics at Wilfrid Laurier University. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be here with everybody. I appreciate the invite. I'll just share my screen to get started. And thank you, Funke, for that amazing introduction to communications. It's a perfect lead into what I'm going to speak about. So hopefully you can see my screen in a moment. Let me know if you can. And I'll keep my chat open too. But as you said, we'll talk about any questions later on. So today I'm going to be speaking about marketing and also some communication strategies for scientists. So highly applicable to biofoundries. And I really think you'll gain some useful tips today that you can really act on and implement starting basically right away. So yeah, let's see here. There we go. So I'll speak for less than half an hour. Again, you can hold your questions. You can put them in the chat for now if you have any. And if you do want the slides, I always make them available. So if you want to request those at the end, I'll let you know how to do that. And then I believe this session's recorded if you do want to refer to it later on. But let's get into it. So I always want to start with a story just to sort of put us all on the same page and frame why marketing is important in the sciences. So meet Michael. This is a pseudonym, but it's an amalgamation of every client I've ever worked with. So Michael has a lab testing company, super successful. He's built a team, expanded, and all of his business has come from referrals. But over time, he noticed, and this again is based on a real story, the phone sort of stopped ringing, leads were drying up. He was starting to see the stagnation in the business. So he provides services to the pharma space, and it's, straight up laboratory testing. So what was the deal? What happened? The market was still strong. Of course, the pharmaceutical industry is still making, important in our daily lives, and the service was still relevant. So if he had done an audit, Michael would have realized that they really were doing no active promotion. So there's nothing out there going out into the world in a dedicated way. They didn't have, like we just learned, a clear or compelling message, and they had zero presence on anything digital. So they were relying, of course, on the traditional tactics that we know are tried and true, but he also had no system for when any leads came in, for organizing them and figuring out how to follow up with them. So overall, it was a really sort of sad state of affairs for Michael's company. We'll get back to how the story turned out, but I wanted to just begin, and maybe we can all sort of feel what he was feeling, and it's a very common problem to have. I won't repeat this. You covered my bio. This is just a summary, but I came from science. I transitioned into marketing probably 5 to 7 years into my career. I wanted to become a marine biologist, but I didn't do that. But instead today I use my science acumen to actually help more scientific businesses. There's a little screenshot of my book there, Scientist as CEO. That's my latest project, published in June. So again, I won't repeat that, but I'm a scientist just like you, and I now use those skills to help grow businesses through marketing. So objectives, again, of repeating a little bit of a biofoundry or any really laboratory, you could apply this to a lab or any business-to-business service-based company. We really want to raise that awareness and gain visibility, because we know we can't just set up shop and have a company and then people just start coming to us. We want to, of course, attract clients or customers from academia. It could be large or smaller companies. And overall, we want to get our message out there with a comprehensive integrated marketing and branding strategy. So that's both external, facing the market and attracting those clients and business, but also internal, how to communicate about the business internally among your colleagues and making sure everybody's sort of on the same page and committed to the same objectives. So let's begin with we touched on some of this already, but some top mistakes when communicating about or marketing any scientific or technical company. And of course, you might see some of these, maybe you make some of these mistakes. I certainly have in the past. So it's a good way to begin the teaching material for today. So mistake number 1, assuming that just because you have the most innovative solution, the most sophisticated technology, that it will draw people to you without doing anything, that they will come to your door and automatically buy. Unfortunately, this is not the case. I work with so many companies who they do have the most innovative solution on the market today. There's research to back it up, but it still, unfortunately, will not be enough to get willing customers to make that purchase. Mistake number 2 is not knowing how to make this. It sounds familiar now, right? The complex, compelling enough to buy. So it's very difficult, actually. It's quite an art and a science to make those messages exciting enough, compelling enough. There's always the so what factor. Okay, you have this analysis technique or this type of, genetic engineering technology. Okay, great. But your audience might not know why they should care and why it's compelling. So that's another big mistake we see. Mistake number 3 is letting marketing overwhelm prevent you from doing anything at all. So marketing is extremely overwhelming. I can think of 1,000 things a company could do to get that visibility. And technology, the speed at which it moves, we all know it's really hard to keep up with. It moves so fast. Now we're dealing with generative AI. Before that, it was social media. Before that, it was, the internet. And all of this stuff that you could do ends up becoming extremely overwhelming. Whether you're in academia or in the industry, or if you're a business owner, you need to spend time running your business. So that's why sometimes you need a bit of help. And marketing is known to be very confusing. So here are 3 musts I will talk about in this presentation. Is The first must for marketing any scientific business is having that clear, compelling message, which we know now. Go where your audience is, and then leverage the power of digital media. Okay, so we're going to focus on these 3 simple things. They're easy to remember, and I hope you gain something from this and learn some real actionable nuggets I'll be sharing. And I always like to show this graphic because, okay, so what is marketing? What does it encompass? There's so much that is under the marketing umbrella. And if you think back just to a business overall, marketing is one of those buckets, right? One of those key functions such as, finance and accounting, sales, human resources. Marketing is one of those. And there are so many techniques and tactics that can fall under that umbrella. Of course, we know social media, we've got our website, search engine optimization, all of these things you see here. I won't read them off to you, but it all is relevant and they all have different purposes along the, along the sales funnel. And I'll show you this graphic. So instead of looking at it like this, like a, list of all the possible things you can do, I like to show it more as this is what I was saying, the sales funnel. So marketing's job is to create that awareness that draws in as many new people, strangers, or we can call them leads, into your business, into your pipeline. So you do that by publishing content. We'll talk about how to do that. But the whole goal is to get as many people into that top pipeline as possible so that you can nurture them down and eventually close them or convert them into a customer. Now, traditionally, that's the point where sales picks up and marketing, it's like a handoff point, but really marketing continues along post sale. It's customer loyalty, all of that stuff. You want to retain customers, get repeat purchases. But we're looking to build that brand identity and reputation and trust, as well as set ourselves apart from competitors. So we don't want to all be communicating about the same stuff. And then we want to provide that all those ongoing touch points at all different phases of the funnel and each phase of the funnel, different activities work differently, but have their own purpose. But we really want to build those long-term relationships. So I love this slide. This is like a screenshot, this sales funnel, because I always return to it when we come up with topics, what to talk about in marketing and what channels to use. So I'm going to go quicker through this because we covered a lot of it. So that's perfect that we learned about that in the first half of today's webinar. So the first thing, obviously, have a clear, compelling message. So your messaging ends up showing up all across every verbal and written and, video, et cetera, communications that your company puts out. So it's really important to nail this message. And overall, what you're saying is why, at the end of the day, you're not just stating what it is you do, right? That's so common. Companies, especially in the sciences, will just simply state what their company is and what it does. But as we learned about already, that's not enough to make someone understand that what the value is to them, to your customer. So you're trying to really say why your offer is the right fit for them to solve their problems. At the end of the day, that's pretty much all business is about if you really think about it and simplify it. So I won't spend too much time on that, but I do like to share this framework. So let's say you have your elevator pitch or value proposition. When you're looking to put out marketing communications, I love to organize it into themes. So I'll show an example on the next slide. These things are best by showing examples, but you want to really commit to the core 1 to 3 topics you'll talk about publicly over time, and then have sub points to that along with a call to action. So in this case, so it could be a biofoundry, it could be, again, I always return to a lab because it's an easy one to explain. So in your marketing, so we're talking all those things I showed, social media, blog posts, articles, your website. For this example, you might decide to focus on the customer benefit. Why does it matter? Why do your services matter? So sub points on that, you could talk about the speed of delivery, high throughput, how it's automated, and why that's beneficial to someone needing, tissue engineering, for example. Or you can you can feature customer success stories as your second pillar. So I'm showing this because you might want to think about for yourself in your own, if you have a company or if you work for a company, what are those core things that would cause someone to really be attracted to what you offer and then proceed down that sales funnel. And of course, having a call to action for every communications is super important in marketing. And that for, in this case, I just made up this example, of course, book a call, or it could be get a quote. So whether you're a scientific professional talking about what you do, you always want to have these themes that you commit to time and time again, no matter where you are speaking of them, and a call to action. So I'll just show quickly, again, I'll go through this part faster, but where do these things show up? So it could be your tagline. I made up a few examples, your print materials. You're really talking about these 3 topics. And again, it doesn't have to be all 3. You can decide for your company if you're talking about, you might have just 2, but any more than 3 sort of confuses your message, or it can confuse your message. So that's how I use the marketing framework. And then once you're coming up with written content, you can pull from there and come up with your topics. So this is just a basic table. You can see how you come up with different topics beneath those categories. So you might be wondering, okay, what about internally? That's all well and good for communicating with the market. But internally, we all know, working for any organization, sometimes there could be confusion amongst staff. So perhaps the leadership team fully understands what the strategy is and what they're talking about internally, what the company's all about, but it could not trickle down to entry-level employees or interns. It's really important to get everybody who works there on the same page. So again, the communications plan, that's such a good document to have. And then it sort of talks about what points, what do you talk about internally, what value do you add in terms of the value proposition, and then it has to come from the top, really. So a really good example, I've done this in the past, is providing training internally on how you communicate inside the organization versus to customers. So you can even host a lunch and learn. You can do role play scenarios. If you're at a trade show, how is it different the way you speak about, the goings on in the biofoundry or in any lab versus what are you going to talk about if someone says, hey, I'm interested in your services. How can you help me? This training is key, especially coming from technical backgrounds. It's not always something we were, brought up or learned in school to be good at. So practicing is key. And then being able to adapt to when you're speaking to, your coworker or to someone, maybe a referral partner internally versus your external potential customers. Because at the end of the day, it's important what we talk about internally because it guides that mission. But you really need to, again, remember that it's probably, I don't want to say more important, but it's equally important to remember about the external communications and what's going out into the world, because without attracting those customers, doesn't matter how cool what we do is internally, there won't be any business. So that was just a sort of a tip on internal communications. So this is where marketing really picks up. And so we have our message. What do we do with it? Where do we go? How do we get it out there? So it starts really with knowing your ideal customer down to their demographics. And of course, we're making up an avatar, but it's based on research and who our audience is. What media do they consume? Are they on LinkedIn or are they on TikTok? Of course, and that's a fake example, like almost a joke for our sector. But you really want to make those lists of what events they're going to, what really bothers them, what are their frustrations? Is it how to get to market quickly? Is it speed? Is it cost? And then once you really understand this avatar, you create a strategy to get your message out through all the tactics and activities that they will use in a business sense. So for me, I'm using my example because it's just easy to explain. So the Michael story I shared in the beginning, that's sort of like my ideal customer. And so that leads me to spend time in a really dedicated places, which is LinkedIn, and I'm not on other social media. I ignore them completely. Speaking in webinars, trade associations, etc. So for you, I want you to think about where is your ideal customer. They're probably at the industry conferences in all different therapeutic area verticals. They are at the big pharma events. They're definitely on LinkedIn. So I'll go to the next slide to sort of explain what I'm speaking of. So this is a very top level snapshot of you could almost say it's everything you would need to do to reach your ideal clients who would participate in a biofoundry or a B2B lab. They are on LinkedIn all the time, whether they're it's their own personal profile or maintaining company pages. We know they're in trade associations and organizations, on committees, and all the networking events, trade shows. I love to maintain lists of these things so that you can, I would encourage you to participate in something like once a month, once a quarter, set goals for yourself. And they're reading the industry media. I'm sure you have bookmarks, right, of industry media that you read, and all the, it doesn't have to be peer-reviewed journals, but the like information websites in your space. So none of marketing is ever passive. It is constantly, you are actively promoting and publishing messaging and putting your communications out there. And this can seem really overwhelming, but it's highly strategic. So this is where digital media comes in. We want to leverage digital media. So again, like the Michael example, we're not looking to do away with traditional techniques that work. We know relationships are important. We know that in-person touch is super important. But imagine the power of supplementing that with digital media, because most of us are spending increasingly more time online, and we have to have a presence there. Or I actually heard I think it was a quote or a comment someone made, but they said, oh yeah, I remember who now. It was on a discovery call. The person said, they said, hey, Jen, I keep seeing my competition showing up at everywhere, all these events, giving talks, writing articles. And I know for a fact that our service is better, more cost effective, and higher quality and faster. So imagine the power that you can have, putting your message and just having that presence across digital media. And, you have to just be really active and strategic. So using this media it's hard to choose where to be, but I shared a couple tips on how to do that. But you really want to get, again, reiterating, as many strangers into your pipeline as possible. So there are ways to do that. I'll focus just on, for today's webinar, on the two topics of content and LinkedIn, because I think for a lot of us, website is more straightforward as our events, but I'm happy to chat offline about those two things as well. But I do want to focus on content, because we can forget that once you have a website up, you still have to do activities to bring people to your site. And content is one way to do that. Of course, yeah, SEO and other ways, but a good rule of thumb, if you are feeling overwhelmed, is to choose one main content type to begin. So for you, it might be a video series, a series of case studies and white papers, or perhaps just a blog. As long as you're consistently publishing answers, and this is what happens when people say, well, what do I talk about? You're going back to your message, but you're also publishing answers to your ideal customers, like biggest problems. If you can think of maybe 5 top questions that you hear from potential customers or your audience, you can create content surrounding that to get more people into your pipeline. And I always then repurpose this content into like 10 different pieces from one core piece. Here's an example I worked on. It's many years ago, but just to show how you can use the digital aspect of content. So we published an article. It was almost like a guide on how to not get your supplement, dietary supplement kicked off of Amazon. So we published it. It was just a PDF, a really valuable guide, and we put it gated behind a form. I'm sure we've all filled out forms before. So we use this as a way to get new leads into the pipeline who are specifically looking for help with Amazon, selling on Amazon. So we did that. So it seems simple, right? You have a PDF, a form. We published it through our newsletter and LinkedIn to get it out there. And what ends up happening is that you do get, of course, we had 400 views, but it went into getting 23 new contacts. So that might sound small, but these were six-figure potential quotes that came in. And these contacts we know turned into sales in the end. So they turned into new customers. So having this one very cost-effective way to market through content is an easy way to build your list, your email list. And then the traditional tactics can pick up. It's email follow-ups, direct, would you like to book a meeting with us at the next trade show? It all flows and it's all easily trackable, especially if you use a CRM, which I always do. I want to always pose a question to the viewers of my webinars. If you're looking to achieve a goal and get to the next milestone, is there one problem-solving piece of content you can publish in the next month? I've worked with people and I've given them this challenge, and they can always come up with that single problem that's, you know, the biggest like burning issue, and then write a how-to to solve it, an example of something. The specifics depend on what you're looking to do, and then turn it into LinkedIn posts. I love to take one, you know, 3-page article and turn it into 5 LinkedIn page posts for my company page, 5 personal posts, and all of those things you see here from one content piece. So that's the number one question I get is, how do I keep up with all of this content creation? You can do it in an achievable way by focusing on one thing and then repurposing and sort of dividing it into chunks across different media. So LinkedIn is a huge and in fact growing way to reach people, and especially when it comes to getting your content out there and of course your company mission, you want to talk about your services, LinkedIn is the place to do it. So if you don't have an optimized company page right now, it could be for a specific bio foundry or any company, and you should optimize that, have a really compelling, you know, headline, just fill it out completely up to best practices. But I'd encourage you to be posting on this company page at minimum once a week, or up to 3 times a week. Sometimes you can do more. I did a personal challenge not that long ago where I posted daily for 44 days in a row. It's very interesting, but you do see increased visibility the more you post. So that's, if you take away any rule of thumb, it's that. But you want to vary your content that you post on LinkedIn. You're not only posting, hey, I'm attending this trade show, meet with me, or only publishing your press releases with no context. You're also talking about, you know, educational tips, how-tos, maybe behind the scenes shots of how your lab works and how you actually process samples, etc. So it's varying what you post as well. That goes a long way to it. So it's not just informing people, it's also entertaining them and almost providing an invitation to work with you. So there's an art to it and creativity, but there's also a science to it. So it's quite fun. I'm only showing this because of like different ways you can get your message out there. You can publish a blog post and share that on your LinkedIn. You can post images of you at an event with a caption and making sure to tag people. And the marketing lab that you see, the bottom right picture, that's a LinkedIn newsletter. It's just like my header image. But LinkedIn newsletters are a really good way for any company page to really reach more people and get what they want to say out there. So if you have a piece of content and you think, well, I want to get it out to, you know, beyond my email list, everybody I'm connected to on LinkedIn, you can do that by creating a LinkedIn newsletter and just sharing it that way. So putting it all together. So how often do I have to do all this stuff? It sounds like a lot. Sometimes you do need help to do it, but it is achievable. And if you can do one thing, I would say have a LinkedIn presence and use it to share your one content piece. But of course, like I mentioned, you don't have to write new stuff every time. And if you're sort of wondering, well, okay, if I'm posting by my LinkedIn page once to 3 times per week, and maybe by my personal profile, maybe once a week, you might think, well, am I annoying people? Are people just gonna think, whoa, that's way too much? It's really funny that it's so noisy out there, and people need to see what you're talking about like a minimum 7 to 10 times before they get it, right? Or if you're hosting an event or something, you have to publish about it in different ways over time to see traction. So this is this is a good resource to take away the frequency of each thing. So just those bullet points that I'm showing, incorporating email marketing. This is a really good cheat sheet for how often to do what. And of course, we always want to measure performance in marketing. So you can't just put out all of your communications and then hope someone comes to you. You have to measure. I measure things on a regular basis for my clients, usually quarterly, but sometimes, well, on my end of things, annually for sure, but quarterly or perhaps monthly. but this is a snapshot of an annual marketing performance table. So you'd plot year over year. So you'd have the result could be like 2022 versus 2023. And you want to look at, again, this sales funnel here. You want to measure the brand awareness. So that's at the top of the funnel. And then going down the funnel, how many leads did you bring in? How many people were actually interested in working with you? Did you collect a business card? Did you get those form submissions? And then tracking top lead sources. So where did most of your leads come from? Track it all. Go to your Google Analytics. LinkedIn has actually really good analytics built in. You don't need to like pay for any of this, but it's a really good way of seeing that growth. And of course, you're looking for numbers, but also percentage growth, and seeing really you want to be in the green each year and growing each year. And I love to track sales revenue. So in our sectors, it can be a really long sales cycle. So someone might come to your lab, do a tour, and express an interest, but perhaps the deal doesn't close for 18 months or something. That's okay. It's just important to track anyway. And then using a CRM, I use HubSpot, I really like. You're able to track where things came from, even over spans of multiple years. So I think that's a really good way to track all of your performance, and then do more of what's working, and you can phase out or stop doing what's not working so well. So recapping very quickly, the 3 musts: your clear and compelling message, go where your audience is, and don't worry about the other stuff, and then leverage digital media. So you can imagine this is like very the tip of the iceberg, what I shared. But a happy turn of events with Michael, and again, this is a real success story based on multiple people. He ended up adjusting his messaging to be less about this is what I do and more about what's a benefit to the customer. He embraced those digital tools. Again, this is a true story. It's so positive. And he ended up seeing that paired with his traditional tactics he was doing already, there's nothing wrong with those, remember, that he drew new leads he never would have gained had he just stuck to what was working 10 years ago when he was seeing his success. So it was a very, very happy scenario, and he's doing wonderfully successful. He's successful in his business today. So 3 decisions for you to make today if you're watching and actually wanting to implement. Number 1, know your number 1 business goal and how you'll measure it. We just talked about measurement. Understand if you can choose what's one content type that will attract your audience and be most effective, and then what's one media channel or marketing channel that will get you to your goal most quickly. So if you do some brainstorming right now or after this, I think you'll have really the steps to implement a marketing strategy, and at least the beginning is one anyway. I normally share in my webinars the entire 5-step process. We talked about just these 2 things, which was really the launch and measuring. And so it was a small slice, as you can imagine, but I can't leave here without shamelessly plugging my book. The only reason I'm doing that is because I know I just want to help more people with a subject matter. So the entire marketing process I've shared in other webinars is in the book. So there's a thing there, but this is also, I thought you might have a little chuckle here. This is my dad. I'm calling him my influencer because he and my mom took a trip to Italy past June. It was my book launch month. So he actually read the book. That's not required in my family or anything, but he really read it and started sending me these pictures. So he was on a gondola in Venice, and then he started upping his influencing game. So I don't know. I just thought it would give you a laugh today, but it's pretty funny. He's a retired engineer and he really enjoyed the book. So there he is at the cottage as the final one. But definitely, if you know anyone in your circles or for yourself, it's pretty cheap online. It's from Amazon. I do work one-on-one with companies. I also have a group program. You can check that out if you see any potential benefit from it. It's kind of like online education and coaching. And if you do want the slides, if you go to, this is my author website. It's jenniferroseandrews.com. If you go to the /blog and you just fill in your email, like subscribe, I'll know it came from tonight's session, and I'll email you the PDF. But that's all for me. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something about marketing, and that's all. I'll unshare my screen now.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. That was fantastic. And really complements Funke's presentation as well. So thank you both. We have one question in the chat. If there's others who have questions, you can put it in the chat or raise your hand using Zoom, and I will ask you to unmute yourself. But the first question is specifically for Jennifer from Nathan. He asks, how can marketing best coordinate with business development efforts?
That's a really good question. I work with actually one of my business partners in business development. And so we work in a really dedicated way actually on how to marry those two things. So you can't have marketing, you can't have business development without the marketing piece, because everything, you're really communicating the same message, whether you're posting stuff on LinkedIn, right? Or you're talking to someone at a conference. So you have to make sure all your materials are aligned, and it's all the same material. So let's say you're at a trade show or something and you're having that intro meeting with somebody, it's going really well, but you need to follow up then with your materials. Everything should look so professional, because unfortunately looks really do matter. It can't just be, the science, the integrity of your data, the technical aspects of what you provide. It really has to, you have to have those show-stopping pieces, and marketing does just that. That's your flyers, your confidential versions of all your documents, your non-confidential versions, your webinar templates, sales sheets, all of that stuff, and of course your website and LinkedIn. Companies always go to those things and they comb through everything, and they do place a judgment on, your BioFoundry or your organization based on what they see and the professionalism. So if anything, it's that added layer of professionalism that supplements the business development. So I don't work in BD, but I work directly with BD executives and teams, and we work together on just about everything. An email campaign, I'll ask them, well, what message do you really want to get out there? What do you want them to, do you want them to book a call with you? Do you want to issue them a quote or a proposal? So we're constantly working together on the same objective, and it's always the same objective: getting your company out there, getting more leads in the door, and actually closing deals. So hopefully that answers that. If that doesn't answer, or you want more, I'm obsessed with this topic, so I can easily speak all day, but I won't. So definitely connect with me online. In fact, if anyone's interested, I'll paste my LinkedIn if it takes, or if you want more clarification, I can keep talking. I don't want to bore everybody.
Oh, this is great, Jennifer. Thanks. Sharon asks, I'm gonna guess this is a question for Jennifer, but maybe Funke has some ideas too. Are there any workshops for SMEs on how marketing strategy they can use, and what stage of scale up of product development? So I guess if there's specific workshops that you could recommend, and if they pertain to a particular stage of product development.
Yeah, all I can think of my own stuff. Of course, I'm doing one, and it's always about that exact thing. I give these same workshops through Centennial College. I have probably 4 to 6 events I'm giving on that. Where else can you get that from? All I really can do is plug my own stuff, to be honest. But I would actually look to it depends on where you are in the world. Of course, like I'm in Canada, but in our region, I always look to the regional innovation centers, like the RICs, or incubators and accelerators. They're always running workshops about marketing. I'm connected with some of them doing my own stuff, but that's kind of maybe all I would say about that. I do frequently share this kind of like these opportunities and workshops on my LinkedIn. So again, I'm gonna copy my URL here. But if that wasn't enough or specific enough, I can do some thinking afterward and let you know if you want to connect via email or something.
Yeah. Ben, I'd just like to touch on that. So I think that's a great question. And Jennifer, I think absolutely plug if you got a solution that could help, please plug it. I also think, in the, like Jennifer mentioned, regional innovation centers in Saskatchewan, for example, we've got an innovation park that constantly runs a whole range of different workshops that could be beneficial to startups and to organizations that are a little bit more advanced. So it depends on you. You definitely find something that's suited to you and where you are in your pipeline. Even some of the colleges or universities in your local area might be offering some of these courses or classes to help you. And LinkedIn as well. There's so many courses on LinkedIn Learning, so many marketing courses, communications courses, courses on digital marketing, how to use social media there. There's a whole range of diverse courses that are available that you can take advantage of as well. So there's a lot. If you just go to Google and type in what you're looking for, you're sure to find a whole variety of options available.
And I'll add to that and suggest if there's fellow academics in the audience, I imagine many of you are, a lot of universities have entrepreneurship programs now. They even have accelerators and incubators on campus. And I've always found the people who work there are really receptive to new ideas. So if you have an idea for a workshop that you genuinely just want to learn about, you can let them know and justify it, and they'll put it together for you. So you can be proactive about it and reach out to them, and they'll create the workshop for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you about the suggestions. I will look into that.
Are there other questions from the audience? Okay, I have a question, my own. I'm curious about when is it too early to share a story, and I'm always worried about overpromising, and maybe that's just my personality, or maybe that's from the scientific perspective, is that I don't want to overpromise something, and this is a question for both Funke and Jennifer.
I guess as long as you are, well, I always go, of course, factual. I'm never one to, exaggerate things or make false claims about or false promises for sure. But I think there's a way you can do it that balances that. Like you can share it. Sometimes you don't always have to mention the client by name. You can be descriptive and call it client A or whatever. But you can still tell the story in a way that, while you conceal, confidential information or detail, you can still share the story. You can talk about what was the problem, describe the problem, make it general enough that you want it to appeal to other people you want to attract. And then you can be as upfront as saying, well, this, I'll call it a study. This study wasn't completed, but to date we revealed these results, and it's super promising because it solves this problem ABC for the customer, and they'll use this data to go on, hopefully if all goes well, to achieve this goal. And then it's really just saying it like you'd speak it or like you would tell a friend, and then you can share some numbers to it, put some data, and always put a disclaimer if it makes you feel more comfortable. This was at the 50% point of this study or project. Here's what we might expect to see. And yeah, that's how I would do it.
I think I think that's a great question too, because it's a conversation that I have had, within our organization. For example, we are also building an accelerated breeding program. So we're building it. We've started on some various aspects of the program, but the whole program itself is getting ready and getting set to launch. However, we aren't waiting for launch dates before we start communicating and sharing about it, because we're trying to also raise awareness within our ecosystem and raise awareness within our potential customers about this program and how it can transform agriculture and food. So we are using a number of communication tactics. For example, we ran a couple of seminars already to share information about accelerated breeding and make sure we establish our voice in the space. And by doing that, we're setting ourselves up to be the leader in this space, because it's really it's not something that's easily accessible to to other organizations. And we're providing these innovations to help transform and help breeders optimize breeding. But they wouldn't know about it except we tell them. So even though we haven't launched the full program, we are already communicating that it's happening, it's coming. We are setting up seminars to talk about various aspects of what accelerated breeding is. And we've got people from Australia who are successfully using accelerated breeding talk about how they've applied it for different crops and different livestock. So I think, you know, it's not too early. It's never too early to tell your story, but, you know, these will be defined by your communication goals. So for example, the goal is not just to sell the product on launch day, but also educate your potential audience and let them know what this can do for them. When you do that and you set up, you know, when you have those defined goals, it enables you to think about different ways to get the message out. It's the same message I've had with scientists who say, well, I don't have a breakthrough yet, so I don't want to talk about anything. But you can get people excited by talking about the potential for what your research could do. That's also very informative to potential audience as well. And they might be interested and say, I want to learn more about what you're doing and maybe see how my organization can support you or fund what you're doing. Or maybe there's some research that we could work on together to help advance what you're working on. So it's never too early to share your story. You just need to think about who your audience is and what the best, you know, what your goal is and the best way to go about sharing that story. And of course, you're never going to lie. You're always going to stick with the truth. But there are ways that you can share your story in advance as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Funke. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. It was a real delight to get this outside perspective. I mentioned this, I think, prior to the call, is that so far our webinars have mostly been other scientists in the lab. So it's been great to get this advice and experience. So thank you so much. I don't think we have our next webinar scheduled quite yet, but we're hoping to host it before the end of the calendar year. If you have ideas or if you want to be proactive about what you want to hear about, let us know. Our contact information is, I think, on the GBA website.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That's been great. Talking and learning also from Jennifer about marketing strategy. So thank you to Ben and Allison for having us on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was going to say the same to you. I learned about communication strategies that I didn't know. So that was fantastic. Thank you so much.